At least I will look a little bit less serious. So, analyzing capitalism and ever-going question, will it collapse or will it conquer the world, reminds me on ever-going question, is GNU/Linux ready for desktop? So I'll try to answer from the same perspective. So I can say that with a little bit of tweaking, it works for me. And I know a lot of Ubuntu people for which it just works out of box. And I know of a lot of people who are very annoyed and who are sick of waiting so the system would work for them. So it's the same for Linux desktop and for the capitalism. And the main problem is that I don't know of annoyed people. I don't know of them personally. Just as I can't see any of them, people who are annoyed by Linux desktop and capitalism here at CCC. So I would say that it works for us. For some of us it works just out of box, and for some of us it just works with a little bit of tweaking. And I'll try to come up with some specific examples which makes me think about that phenomena in quite careful and tricky way. So I don't think that there is really simple critique of that we just should be scared when someone says interest, capital, and things like that, and that's usually happens. So the capitalism, just as Linux desktop, is assimilating and appropriating ideas from the outside. The big problem is that capitalism is so much better than Linux desktop in doing that. So one of the examples how capitalism looks like these days is quote from one ad, and it goes, "The cybernaut generation is intrinsically anarchist, endlessly anti-authoritarian, and hates corporate America. Therefore, this is not an ad for Coke. We repeat, this is not an ad for Coke." And that was ad from Coca-Cola in 1996. So yeah, that's how capitalism can be smart and in which way it can talk to us. So that process is just happening over and over again. And there is a great book by Thomas Frank, Conquest of Cool, which just analyzing how counterculture was assimilated and appropriating from capitalism from 60s. So there was one assimilation by capitalism which is quite appropriate for this talk, and that's the idea that software doesn't have to be closed commodity on the market. So yeah, that you can make some money. So that was appropriated by Red Hat, by IBM, by Novell. So they are representatives of that smart capitalism, which realize something which is quite different than the regular capitalism which we see regularly and which we critique regularly. So I would say that in that sense, that was a big success, both from free software movement and open source movement. And during the last 20 years, capitalism just realized that in digital world, actor can compete with its competitor with being more open. So that openness is just one of the strategies how you can actually be successful on the market. So I'll just say one example. MySpace was very closed, no photos for non-members. It was quite ugly, and we know everything about MySpace. And it was very close and very popular. And then Facebook just came out with the developers API. So it was a little bit more open, but still closed. And then Google is trying to get into that area, being even more open with open social. So we could see that's a strategy which is assimilated by the capitalism, and if you go really radically in that direction, we should think of when capitalism is not anymore capitalism, when it goes that much open. So just imagine 20 years from now that if someone would tell you that people will be able to sell anything from their home directly to anyone else in their home, and that one will just will need to bid, and the other will then, when it gets money, it will just send the money, and that's eBay, and it's a huge scale. And the other example is again the quote from guy from Yahoo Music, and he was targeting the music industry, and so he had the representatives of the huge, biggest, fattest guy from the music industry, and he said, "I will not spend another dime paying engineers to build false control, making listening to music harder for music lovers. I will put all of my energy into making it easier and making the experience better. I suggest to you to do the same." So at the same time, you have people who didn't really assimilate music industry, who didn't really assimilate what's going on with in the digital world, and then someone saying the same thing with any anti-capitalist will say at this moment when we'll target the music industry. So also just some time ago, if you imagine that some state, just a second, said if state offered anyone infrastructure where they can pay per processor cycle, so building infrastructure where people will be able to pay per processor cycle or bit information from the storage. So very, very optimized system where you actually pay at the scale which is appropriate, for you. So then you can upscale as your business or whatever you do as it goes. So it can upscale to the Amazoning scale. So yeah, that's what Amazon is offering these days. So their product and what they actually provide is an infrastructure which can be used even against them or competing with them or competing with any other a big player on the market today. And I have prepared also one more example, and that's what Google and how Google assimilated what's going on these days. And Google is a very peculiar one and very tricky one. So I'll try to say something a little bit more before I get back to Google. So
good couple of minutes more.
Yeah, I think that I'm fine with a couple of minutes. So I would like to say something about state and essential common resources and building infrastructure. So state used to be guardian and provider of very essential infrastructures built on top of common resources. So you just need to think of water supply, highways, rails, and etc. And by time, state becomes so corrupted and inefficient comparing to the market that most of the tasks which state was supposed to do was just outsourced. So that's how they call it. So most of the tasks and fights which they actually need to do are just given to the businesses, and they forgot all of in most of the countries. They just forgot that task. So actually there is an empty space where there are not really big actors which will fight for commons, for things which are just in the society, and which will really do the dynamic policing and policies of how actually to access the resources. Just imagine the radio frequency spectrum, which probably won't change forever, and it can be much more accessible these days to everyone, but states won't do that because state just lost that role in the society. And we could see that we got some other actors in the society to fight to fight that fight. And one of the examples is definitely Free Software Foundation fighting for more commons, and the other civic actors. And what we can see at the latest stage of capitalism is that, the new essential infrastructures which are building on top of resources, because we could just imagine that the infrastructure, the communication infrastructure is some kind of invisible, and it's just resource, and Google, Yahoo, Amazon, and eBay are building the big, huge-scale infrastructures which are owned and governed by them, and they love their citizens. So they are the new states, and they love their citizens. They provide to their beloved citizens a lot of products and services, free as in free air, or cheap as in cheap water. And they like to talk sweet. So they really behave like states, and it's very tricky, just as Coca-Cola ad, which I mentioned before. So I will just for the end, I will just show you one example how Google actually appropriated the sweet talk to their citizens. So one guy did the Gaia.
Make it short, myself. Make it short.
Okay, I'll make it short. Yeah. So he did the open source Google Earth client. Because we didn't have Google Earth on any free software. So he did something which was illegal. If you imagine how Microsoft or any other big business will approach that guy, it's not really how Google did it. So Google did it. Michael Jones, the chief technologist of Google Earth, Google Maps, and Google Local Search, wrote to the author, and he was saying things like, we appreciate that you like our software and enjoy the many millions of dollars and years of labor that the licensed data represents. Unfortunately, your curiosity about the protected server mechanisms ignores the Google Earth terms of service, the software license agreement that you accepted when installing Google Earth, the built-in encryption mechanisms with the client-server protocol, the economic rights of a worldwide network of providers who license this data to Google, and most of all, the sense of fair play that is the basic relationship between Google and its users worldwide. The kindness through which Google has made the wonder of our planet available to more than 100 million users around the world is now threatened, not by I don't know how to pronounce that in English, and fierce business's competitor, but by you. I'm not an attorney. We remain hopeful that this was an unintended result of what started as intellectual curiosity by a smart engineer like ourselves, who has a passion to learn how things work. We really need to have you take down that code and refocus your work toward building an open Earth viewer that uses open Earth images, such as NASA or licensed Earth images, blah, blah, blah. So it's very, very, they love their citizens, they love their smart citizens, so they will do everything they can, and I just can't really imagine the state which will do the same. So in that sense, this is not the capitalism which we usually criticize. This is the capitalism which changed quite a lot, and I think that we should rethink actually and what we think about capitalism and communism in digital world. Yeah, thank you very much.
One of the points that we were discussing yesterday, and one of the points that Marcel wanted to get across, was that in this book that he mentions, The Conquest of the Cool, by Tom Frank, what he claims is that at some point in the 50s, the advanced capitalism, 50s, 60s, appropriated practices of counterculture, not so much in order to create new products, which it could sell to counterculture consumers, but rather it appropriated the practices of counterculture in order to revolutionize the management structure. So you can imagine they had at the time old management mind frame, which was very hierarchic, very inflexible, and with new countercultural practices and methodologies, what they could do, they could replace that old mindset, replace the people who represented that mindset, and created so-called flexible capitalism. So that was sort of a true ruse of capitalism appropriating counterculture. And we were discussing yesterday, and Marissa said,